everyone. Welcome to Zannen, Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. As always, this is a podcast that focuses on the connections between anime and Canadian media. And joining me today, for the first time since episode 46 is when she was last on, a good friend of mine and friend of the show, Sarah Galbraith, anime enthusiast, kitty enthusiast, and tea enthusiast, Yuri enthusiast. You used to write some games. Sarah, how are you doing? Thanks for coming on.
Right now I'm in the middle of a move to Toronto, so I'm excited since I heard the anime kind of scene there is also pretty big, so I can't wait.
Moving from Vancouver Island, so hopping from BC to Ontario.
Well, I haven't really been there before. I've been in Toronto for a day between flights.
Yeah.
So this is just gonna be a whole new experience. So that's what I've been up to, and everyone knows when you move, it's just a lot.
Yeah, you're heading to Ford Nation. And maybe you'll be in there in time for Anime North, maybe not. I hope to see you there. But yeah, Sarah, thanks for coming on. So this is a special episode. March 18th, 2025 marks the 10th anniversary of the Zannen Canada podcast. It's also a special episode in that this is the 100th episode of Zannen Canada, but I'd rather downplay that a little bit because the fact that it took 10 years to get to episode 100 is actually kind of embarrassing for a podcast. I think that averages out to one episode every 2 to 3 months. I remember when I was first planning this, I was thinking I'd do one of these a week, and no way that could have ever happened. And I want to say that I just made this snap decision one day, in 2015, in spring of 2015, to just start airing my anime grievances and give Canadians a voice again in a podcast. But it just was not a snap decision at all. I actually agonized over the silliest things for months before I decided to launch this. It's just figuring out the logo, figuring out what to call it, and then ultimately just settling on the same name I had used a decade prior. All incredibly overthought. And I have to say, I don't know if I've improved much over the last decade. I know I've improved since the first episode. I can say that much. Has the podcast gotten any better? I don't know, but I'm still here. And when I started it, obviously I had so much to say about all these outrageous things like anime that you can't watch in Canada because of Hulu. And looking back, it's insane that, you could think that was something so important back then with everything that's going on in the world today, that it was a time when you could give that any kind of priority. It's hard to go back to that headspace again for me. Not a lot of people wanted me to listen to me complain about things like that. But, as the show went on, I found it more exciting to just kind of try to craft this narrative around anime in Canada and just look at all the different facets of how it touches culture here and how just the culture around it and fandom is unique here compared to other countries. And I think, that is really the more important thing. Anime is something that brings us together, and it's something we need. There's a lot of horrible things going on in the world right now. I'm, as you can tell, I'm not really well prepared for this episode. I'm just kind of rambling. It's hard to deal with, but at least right now, anime is still there for us. And as long as anime is there for us and it brings us together, it's going to give us something to talk about. And there's something for us to talk about on this show. Can't guarantee this show will be around forever. But, for now, I'm still here, and yeah, it's good. I'm glad I'm doing this. Zannen Canada hasn't been a huge, massive success. I have, a pretty stable, reliable audience, that seems pretty faithful to it. And a lot of people seem to appreciate what I do. I will point out, I do want to say, I don't hear from people a lot. I'd like to hear more feedback about the show. It has been a while since I've received any emails. I know people are listening to the show, but I don't hear a lot about it on a lot of responses on social media or on the blog. Folks, I want to hear more about what you think. If you have any thoughts about the show over the years, what stood out, what have you enjoyed? What should I do more of? Let me know. The email for this podcast is zannencanada@gmail.com. And of course, there's, a comment section on the blog and Blue Sky. Is there anything worth discussing that I bring up anymore? I mean, I'd like to think so. I was even thinking community is so important these days, and finding new outlets for community is really important. Like maybe I should make a Zannen Canada Discord. Is that something that people would like? I don't know. I've tried doing things like that before, and they don't really work out very well. But maybe I'll try it again. If you think that's a good idea, tell me, and maybe I'll consider it. Maybe do we need a refuge for anime fans in Canada to sort of get together and talk about things like buying Canadian, or meeting together at conventions and trying to encourage people to go to Canadian conventions. These are discussions people are having now that are really important, and maybe we should find new ways to encourage it. So, Sarah, speaking of cons, we were at a con recently. It's Con in Victoria. Sarah, what did you think of the con? How did that go for you?
It's been so long since I've been to a convention. It's still very small, like the last time I remember it from a decade ago, but I love
Yeah,
the community. Pretty much you walk around, and by the time you do your like second loop, like you kind of know everyone's face already,
yeah.
whether it's the staff or lots of cosplayers. Like doesn't matter how small an anime convention is, like when people cosplay, it's so, like they're so good.
Con is tiny, and it's always been tiny. And it's weird. Victoria, BC is somewhere I would think would be able to support a bigger con. And I think it can. But, Con is a great community, lots of great people at the event, and they bring a good energy to it. Like, it's at the University of Victoria. That's not a bad venue at all. But the big problem with Con is that it's in the middle of February in a venue that's largely outdoors, timed in a way that it's dark during a lot of the convention, and it's not really set up in a way that's going to grow a whole lot. In a situation where it's difficult for it to grow, I know they do it that way because it's the reading break, and that's the one time of the year where they can get the campus. They could book the campus for a weekend, and apparently get a good deal. Although apparently that's the deal they get now is not as good as it used to be. But yeah, they're kind of stuck. I'd love to see them move to a larger venue, because I don't think they can do it at that venue. Like, even if it were a month later, like that would help so much. But apparently that's not going to be an option for them. And I'd love to see them move to another venue, but it's such a huge risk. I know that the other major convention that was in Victoria, more like their general Comic-Con, they're on official hiatus now. That is a con that they do at like the convention center downtown. But apparently they are kind of done. They couldn't keep it going. It's a little unfortunate that the con is just remains stubbornly small. But it's still fun. There were lots of great panels. My panels, I did a whole bunch. They all went really well. There was a fantastic panel on North Korean anime. I learned a lot of that one.
Oh, that was a really good one.
Yeah, they had this tiny little gaming room. Actually, a highlight for me was that they had a couple of PC-98s set up, and I got to try one of those out for the very first time. That was a fun way to sort of waste time. But yeah, I like to go to SakinoCon again. But yeah, little unfortunate that it's just kind of stuck being this small little convention. And for me, I have to take the ferry to get there, and that does make it a little bit of a to-do, and it's kind of makes it impossible for anybody who's just not in southern BC to go to the convention as well. Yeah, I still had a good time. I'm glad. It was just fun meeting up with you and all of our friends, which is the most important part of any convention.
Agreed. I got to see some really fun panels. Mitch Chan did a really good panel on the food and Delicious in Dungeon, and the food in Spy Family. So
Yeah,
that was.
she put so much work into her cooking panels. I was the guinea pig for for one of her for the hot pot that she did for the Delicious in Dungeon one.
So yeah, no, I had a good time. The panels, there's some really fun panels there. There was one about like the history of rhythm games, and as soon as Rock Band was brought up, I think I aged a lot in the room. I think everyone was 20 years younger than me there. And historical context, like, yeah, like this was before my time, and then I'm just like, oh god, this was my time.
But yeah, SakitoCon, good time overall. And yeah, you know what? I look forward to what Canadian conventions will offer in the coming years, because I'm not going to be going to American conventions with all of the terrible trade and border issues that have been going on, and I expect will only get worse in the coming months. I've canceled my plans for SakuraCon and for Otakon this year. And I do wonder, with all those changes, if we're going to see like more Japanese guests or more support coming to Canadian conventions as a result of that. That's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Like, I don't know if all of the immigration stuff in the States is having an impact on Japanese guests going there right now. I know there's speculation about it. I haven't heard anything of like a hard impact. But that shouldn't have an impact in Canadian conventions. You have events like, Anirevo, Otakuthon, Anime North, Animethon that have a steady stream of Japanese guests. In fact, I think Animethon already announced like their big concert series for this year. And you don't go to that many conventions, so I guess there haven't been any major changes in your con plans in the near future.
No, but I'll probably start looking at conventions like in the Toronto area, or even just general like conventions, whether it's like comics, books. Like I'm sure there's like more of that stuff going on, so I'm just kind of excited to see what's out there.
Man, it's gonna be weird just not going to SakuraCon for the near future. It's just that was like the one thing I could be sure that I do every year for the longest time, and it's just out of my. I can't go anymore. It's just not something I can do. It's not advisable for a number of reasons. Primarily, other stuff has come up, obviously, that I don't want to focus on too much in this show because it's depressing to think about. But, I can't travel to the States and spend money with the sort of trade situation right now. And it's raising a lot of questions right now. Like, we're all trying to buy Canadian, band together, pump up the nationalism, and that's something we have to do through our anime love and communities as well. And I'm curious, Sarah, has the movement to buy Canadian not support American, companies as much? Has that made any impact on your buying habits yet? As far as, like, obviously it's impacting us for things like groceries and everyday essentials. But like when we look at things related to anime or fandom or manga in general, has this had any impact on you? Do you expect it to?
So far, no impact yet. I think it's just sort of like a wait and see approach. I
Yeah.
know streaming services moved to a more like free streaming services. There's Canadian streaming services you can use, so there's that.
Streaming is like the big question, because like people, when it comes to your everyday staples, when it comes to your oatmeal, and when it comes to your apples, it's a lot easier to find a Canadian alternative. But streaming, replacing your favorite Netflix shows, that seems to be the leap that people are most reluctant to make, like cutting Netflix, cutting your US streaming services. Is that is that something people are going to be willing to do? And even then, it's like, but if you cut Netflix out, is it better to subscribe to Crave because it's a Canadian service? But then if you're watching American content on Crave, and technically your money's being funneled to HBO through Crave due to their, agreements and licensing, even if you don't watch US content on there, are you still buying Canadian? I mean, difficult question to answer. If you subscribe to Netflix and you only watch non-US content, does that make it better? Are you voting with your eyeballs in that case? I mean, most of what I watch on Netflix isn't from the States, but when we get into like the cultural products, it gets a lot more complicated. And then, of course, you have Crunchyroll, owned by Sony, but it's an American company. But they control all of your non-American anime content. When it comes to streaming, like, can you adjust your habits? Does dropping it do anything? Does it send a message to anyone? I have questions, but I'm afraid I don't have answers here. But yeah, like, one thing I could definitely advocate doing is using CBC Gem, though. I don't think a lot of people are just still aware of that service, or how much you get with it for free, or what you get with it if you pay for the $5 a month, it comes with, it removes all ads, and you get CBC News Network as well, which is, 24-hour, even the best 24-hour news is probably not good for you, but you could certainly, certainly having access to a better news source probably isn't something to complain about too much.
I think you're right about having a lot of complicated issues. Like, if we use Crunchyroll but only watch it for, Japanese media, like, how it's just like, everything is too interconnected in the entertainment world right now. So it's just really a wait and see what happens. See if there's more support for like CBC Gem or things like that. Or even more support for local anime cons in Canada, because a lot of people will not be able to go to the States. Or
yeah, it's going to be interesting if there's like a migration or shift in people's habits because of that. With streaming, like Crunchyroll did announce that they have the new Anne Shirley anime, the new Anne of Green Gables adaptation, and it's gonna have an English dub but not a French dub. And I think a lot of people are hoping that English dub might be done in Canada. I don't think I'm putting my money on it, but we'll see what happens with that, I guess. But yeah, that's an interesting example. American dub of Anne Shirley on Crunchyroll. Like, what message do you send when you watch that? And who's going to perceive that message when they receive it? A lot of wait and see here. And then there are bigger questions. Like I mean, I'm asking really big questions here, but we're so used to, like, in the movie theaters, the domestic box office is both Canadian and US combined. Like, is that still going to be the case moving forward? Home video, like home video releases, the US and Canadian rights are like almost always tied together. Is that something that's still going to be tenable? On the note of home video, I actually reached out to our good friends at Media OCD, Justin Zavakis' company. And they did confirm that, at least as of the situation is fluid and changing. This could all change in a week. This could all change by the time I release this episode. But as of right now, apparently, neither the tariffs nor counter tariffs will apply to home video imports. If you are, I don't know, supporting a company like small independent company like Media OCD, I guess you can make your decision there, even though they are an American company. We can all make little calls like that here and there. But right now it seems that home video is not directly going to be impacted by this, by all the trade war stuff. Apparently the jury's kind of still out on books though, because the tariffs are probably going to impact the production of books, because so much stuff is printed in Canada that's made in the US. And I don't know if there's going to be an impact on like finished books that you import into Canada from the US. This is going to get complicated and potentially nasty. That might be something to keep an eye on. I will say, I don't know what you could actually say what the morality of Netflix is at this time, but I do have my Netflix account right now, and I can tell you what I was using it to watch recently. And that was a show I've been waiting to come on that service for a very, very long time. I think I was the only one waiting and who really cared about this. Inuyasha, the final act. So, Sarah, you understand, right? You know why Inuyasha, the final act, finally being added on Netflix back in November of 2024 was a big deal. I don't have to explain this to you, right?
No, I remember I was going through old anime and Netflix had Inuyasha, and I think they only had the first 2 seasons. I remember
for the longest time, they only had the first 2 seasons.
And I went to the end, and I'm like, there's gotta be, I gotta go. So I bought the entire box set online. My husband's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I binge watched the rest of it.
So it's funny, the first retrospective, because we do retrospectives on shows that have cultural importance in Canada on this podcast. It's a big part of what the podcast is. If you listen to this podcast, I don't have to explain that because you know this. But the first one we did at Inuyasha is a little bit of a rough episode. I didn't really know what I was doing. And how to talk about Inuyasha in a Canadian cultural context. I was hoping that this would be the episode where I kind of made up for that. But I just haven't been in the headspace to properly do a bunch of notes, so we're just going to kind of yammer on about it a little bit. But yeah, when I did that first retrospective on Inuyasha, I pointed out that you could only watch the first 2 seasons of Inuyasha on Netflix because the rest of it was not available to stream in Canada at all. This has been a persistent problem. I mentioned at the beginning of this show that when I started the podcast, something I would rant on and on about is how certain shows would be exclusive to Hulu. And it was always kind of infuriating that Inuyasha was one of those shows. If you wanted to watch all of Inuyasha streaming, you couldn't. If you wanted to watch Inuyasha the final act streaming in Canada, you couldn't. All you could do was see those first 2 seasons on Netflix. And I did point out in that episode, I remember, that someone just looking for a simple Inuyasha nostalgia fix, you're probably going to be satisfied with just the first 52 episodes. But not you, of course. 52 episodes wasn't enough for Sarah.
No.
Sarah, that's why I asked you to come on today, because you are maybe you might be the biggest Inuyasha fan I know. You love Inuyasha. Could you tell us what your personal background with Inuyasha is?
Oh gosh, well, it all started with Bionics in high school, and I just remember hearing from a friend like, oh yeah, I started watching this show called Inuyasha, and I'm like, oh, I'll watch it too, and I got hooked.
You weren't there. You weren't there on day one. You had to have
No.
your friend pointed it out to you. Oh.
Well, yeah, I feel like I was always a little bit late to something, but no, like I got hooked right away. And I would watch it religiously every week,
Mm-hmm.
whenever they aired a new episode. And I was a huge fan. Like I would get, and then I got into the manga, and then I think Inuyasha was. I was always like an anime fan, but I think Inuyasha got me to both anime and manga, and kind of opening up to like conventions and fandom. Like it was like definitely my like gateway to more like Sailor Moon. Like I grew up with Sailor Moon. I was like young. I didn't really know anything about like it was from Japan. I just knew I loved it. But then like Inuyasha was sort of like kind of got more interested in like what's airing, going to conventions and fandoms.
Yeah, it more crystallized your appreciation of anime as anime. I think I think that's what it was for a lot of people. It was a huge part of just anime history on YTV. I think bigger than most people tend to appreciate. We always focus on Sailor Moon as like the big title, or Sailor Moon and Pokemon as like the biggest drivers of anime on YTV's lineup. But I still honestly think that Inuyasha is like, it's right up there. I don't think it still gets the appreciation it deserves for crafting like anime fandom in the English language Canadian sphere that it does. Like obviously, if you talk to your average person in this country, like there's going to be more familiarity with Sailor Moon, but it's just like people know Sailor Moon. They watch Sailor Moon, but they're not like an anime fan because of Sailor Moon. But Inuyasha is a show that I think more than any other show that really aired on Canadian TV, I think it is like the show that aired on the television show that made people into anime fans. That's really how I've found it to be. Which is why it was just so kind of insulting for so long that Viz wouldn't make it available to stream. And it was just kind of puzzling because, you had this show. Obviously, it has Vancouver cast because, that's just how Viz was handling a lot of stuff at that time. And of course, their first big hit was Ranma 1/2, which also was dubbed in Vancouver. So it's not surprising that they would carry that on to Inuyasha as well with the other Rumiko Takahashi works. But when, obviously YTV only ran the original, and Bionics was basically done by the time the final act was produced. So the final act was a 26-episode season that kind of capped off Inuyasha. Inuyasha, the original one, it only adapted up to like, how much did it do? Like 30 volumes or something like that? I think under 30 volumes of the manga. So little more than half of the whole series. How many volumes is Inuyasha? 50, 52, 53 or something like that?
About, yeah, 56 volumes.
56, okay.
56 volumes, 558 chapters.
Yeah, so the original Inuyasha, it ran for 167 episodes, and it covered just a little more than half of the manga that Rumiko Takahashi's manga that ran in Shonen Sunday magazine. And then it just ended. It kind of ended kind of mid arc, in a very awkward space, and that's really noticeable when you come into watching the final act, because it picks up literally right where the first series ended. But the final act, it was the rest of the manga, 20 volumes of content crammed into 26 episodes. So interesting show. It definitely takes a much different approach. But yeah, the final act was just something that was just always kind of missing in Canada, despite how big of a deal the original series was. With they brought the Ocean cast back to dub it and everything, but right when it was airing, it was actually when it was first airing in 2009. It was one of the first shows that Viz simulcast. They actually simultaneously ran the subtitled version as it was running in Japan, but it was Hulu exclusive. And because it was Hulu exclusive, that means you could only access it in the United States, and it remained Hulu exclusive right up until 2024. 2009 to 2024. That's just incredible. And for the longest time, it just seemed like this was the one show that they wouldn't free out of Hulu jail. It was just stuck there. And as long as it was in Hulu jail, you couldn't watch it in Canada. But finally, that curse was broken. The curse was broken last year, and it was added to Netflix. And they had also added the rest of Inuyasha up there. So you can now watch the whole thing on Netflix. If you are choosing to support Netflix, it's there. It is there for you to watch. And because I'm a complete lunatic, I had vowed that I would not ever watch Inuyasha the final act until it was made available either to broadcast or stream in this country. I didn't want to go through the effort of pirating it. Didn't want to spend money on the Blu-ray because I'm just not that big of a fan. But I still wanted to see it, how Inuyasha ended. So I finally, in 2024, end of 2024, 15 years later, I was finally able to watch it. And we're going to talk about it now. To me, this was a huge deal, but it didn't really seem like a lot of other people cared. Even Jonathan Andrade from I Miss Bionics. I thought for sure he was going to have like a big news article on Inuyasha the Final Act finally airing in Canada, but he did not. Not even he cared. Just me. So Sarah, when did you first watch the final act? Did you watch it when it came out, or did you just wait for a few years and buy it on like home video later? What's your background with the final act specifically?
Aside from being very sad and disappointed for this long hiatus, yeah, I watched it when it aired. It was almost like just out of spite though. I'm just like, I waited 5 years. I'm just gonna finish this. And I remember watching it, but I don't think I allowed myself to enjoy it. I think I was just
Was this out of revenge of the fact that it took them so long to adapt it to anime, or just the fact that they weren't allowing you to watch it legally?
Oh, I think it was just like, like Bionics. I think we all remember where they would air like 4 episodes of Inuyasha in a row, and people made fun of it. I loved it. I ate it up, and
I made fun of Inuyasha marathons constantly, but not you.
Well, I was front and center with all of those Inuyasha marathons. I was having, it was great every time. Like, oh, and followed by another episode of Inuyasha. Followed. I'm like, yes. It just was really sad about like how even though there was fans and Inuyasha was huge on Bionics, and it just never had a proper resolve through legal airing and all that. And so yeah, I just remember just being so sad, like just how well they treated like a bookend of Inuyasha when it was just a huge thing on Bionics, along with like like Full Metal Alchemist, Gundam Seed, like
Yeah.
oh, like the staple.
No one was really airing anime in that Canada at that time, and it's just weird. It's like Viz just didn't care. They didn't care that it was like this big thing in Canada, so there's like, we don't need to stream that there. Like they eventually made a big exception for Sailor Moon. That took 2 years for them to make an exception for Sailor Moon, but Inuyasha, no carve out for that. You can you can wait. About the show itself, so as I was talking about, very different from the rest of Inuyasha, because we're talking about a show that is quite infamous for dragging things out excessively from a manga that's already kind of laid back from in its storytelling, because Inuyasha, it's kind of a sitcom. You just kind of spend time with the characters. Things progress very slowly. Occasionally you get your sort of plot advancement episodes, and then you have sort of these more kind of funny standalone adventures that don't really impact anything. And then you have your anime only filler episodes are just complete just kind of nothing sometimes. The original Inuyasha, I fell off of it in on YTV. I think I watched up until the end of the Band of Seven saga, and then after that, I just kind of fell off. I like the anime only fillers just became too much. And I did come back for the final episode, and it was really surprising when I jumped into Inuyasha, the final act, streaming now on Netflix. Again, it just dives right in where the old series ended. And I had to go back and watch the last few episodes, and there were still some things I was like really not clear about. But yeah, you can see the difference right away. It is dashing through that material so quickly. What takes place in one, at least in the first half, what takes place in one episode of Inuyasha the Final Act, that used to be like 4 episodes of the original series. Like they're moving through content so quickly. It feels like it kind of almost has the opposite problem of the original, where like nothing really has a chance to sink in. What it's like, you don't really get a chance to kind of appreciate anything. The series has the same director that it had.
I feel like it was like the same kind of production team.
So that's the thing. Like, in some ways, this is something you kind of only see with anime. You see it more with anime than any other television medium, I find. That they brought most of the production staff back. And in many ways, it kind of feels like it's taking off exactly where the old show left off. Yasuno Aoki, who directed pretty much all of the original after it shifted to digital animation, he came back, and they did have a different screenwriter for this one, Katsuyuki Sumisawa. He wrote the Inuyasha movies, but it's still like the writing is very consistent with the original. Like, if something is important in this show, like, they're going to repeat it over and over again so that you don't miss it. I know that when I first started watching, I noticed that Koga had these like this new claw weapon that I didn't remember seeing before. And I was kind of confused. Like, when did he get that? Did I miss that part? Is it important? And I knew it wasn't important because they weren't constantly talking about it and repeating it all the time. Because I knew that if there have had any importance whatsoever, they would make sure that I understood that. But yeah, it's still following that same kind of over-explaining everything, holding your hand, flashing back to things. They go through things so quickly, but they still find lots of rooms for flashbacks. Which I found kind of funny, because when this was airing, I heard people talk about how this is, it's more violent and edgy compared to the old series, and like the blood is red, and they can show more graphic demons being ripped apart, or people being immolated, or things like that, and they do. In terms of tone, it didn't feel any different than the old series. This is despite the fact that it did air at like 2:30 in the morning in Japan. It was actually a late night show. It wasn't a primetime show anymore. So I mean, I guess they kind of took advantage of that in terms of content, but not in terms of the actual like storytelling and execution. It's very much the same Inuyasha, but despite that, the pacing is very wonky because they're fitting so much content into so little. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were about the pacing overall. Did you think it was like a big? Did you find it to be like a jarring contrast to the original? Did it still kind of accomplish what it needed to? What did you feel anything was missing? Obviously, something was missing. Did you feel that too much was missing? I mean, I think you read the manga too, so you have a better idea of how they handled this as an adaptation.
I actually thought the pacing was pretty well done. I will agree, there was a lot of flashbacks. I think we've all seen the many times Inuyasha got hit by the arrow from Kikyo.
So many times.
You got to see the old original. Like, I think it was just such a contrast. Like, here's the Digipaint, and then here's like the old, kind of more gritty animation. So every time they showed that, I'm like, oh man, I remember how it looks so good.
This is what they took from you.
This is what they took from us. Or the scene where Kaku has to relive over the scene where he kills his family and Plan Man. Like, like there's those two scenes. Like, they'll always like remember this. You're like, and then of course, because there was that huge gap, like there's a lot of like flashbacks, kind of like explanations. But I think overall, the pacing, like they had a focus. They still had they still had some time for like Kagome's school antics, so there was still some fun little
Yeah,
side episodes.
they fit in like they tried to make sure to fit that in. I think there was like a cold open or an opening segment that focused on a bit of that, and they did get one episode in for that. But you can tell that's the kind of stuff that they really cut out the most, from what I was feeling.
Yeah, it was definitely like focusing on the plot. Well, the plot was really just, hey, this is the final dungeon. Everyone, please level up your weapons.
That's the big issue I have with the way that they approach this, because you have 20 volumes of manga, and 26 episodes to work with. It's tough. You got to make some tough decisions. But it just feels like they're thinking, okay, we have to figure out what the spine, the backbone of Inuyasha, the final act, the important events of this story. What are we going to structure it around? They had an opportunity to reimagine the narrative more than they did, because it seems like they're very stuck on having to make sure that we're following the sequence of events that are truly important in Inuyasha. And it's always the plot devices. It's always the weapon upgrades. It's always Inuyasha's adamant barrage, his new thing that he yells out constantly. It's all these different incarnations of Naraku. It's just like it's like they have to make sure that they're being faithful to these elements and just sort of condensing everything around them. And, I don't know if it's the director making these decisions, someone else on the production committee, or if Rumiko Takahashi wants to make sure that all these things are focused on. But if you're going to crunch 20 volumes of manga into 26 episodes, it's like, that's not really the best way to do it. You have to be a little more flexible. You have to reimagine things. Like, if it weren't for the fact that Inuyasha, the final act, starts right in the middle of this whole Goryomaru story with, yet another one of Naraku's incarnations that just seem to keep getting worse and worse as the series goes on. If it hadn't started just right in the middle of that, like, it almost feels like you could have just skipped that entire story and just sort of simplified things and had fewer incarnations, because they just all kind of bleed together after a certain point. It certainly doesn't help, as we were both ranting about before we started recording, that they made the decision to kill the best character in episode 2. You start with killing Kagura, which means there's no Kagura for the rest of the series. Episode 2, she's gone. It's just like, well, this show's gonna be worse for that decision.
No, I agree. Like, when they killed her off, I'm like, oh, that's way too soon. She was like one of my favorite characters. I think there's a lot of Kagura fans, and I hate the
Yes, that
fact
is
that,
me, Kagura fan,
yeah.
Jesse Betteridge.
Oh, but sorry, she had to die because Shishomaru had to learn compassion so he could upgrade his weapon.
Exactly. Like, I mean, all of Naraku's incarnations, except for, I think, Byakuya, basically, they're all trying to betray him. But she did it best. She is the best schemer. It was always the most interesting with her. And it all just amounted to her dying for a... just for the benefit of Sesshomaru's character. And it's just like, there's just so much more even if you were just going to do that, there's so much more you could have done with their relationship. And then it just kind of stops there. And then with Sesshomaru, for years I had heard about, like, one of the major things that happens is how he discovers that Tenseiga, the sword he believed was useless, could actually be used to kill demons in hell. And it's just like, hell yeah, that's a cool revelation. The way that actually plays out narratively is very boring. It's like, oh, Sesshomaru is now being put to a test. He will pass this test and surpass the expectations of his mother, because of course he will. And, it's just always just working towards those upgrades that lead to the final battle. And in this case, upgrading Tenseiga so it could be used for Inuyasha, but it's okay, because Sesshomaru is going to generate his own sword somehow when he's faced with Magatsuhi, who's not a Naraku incarnate, but just the evil manifestation of the Shikon Jewel, who is not very well explained in the anime, and just winds up being a floating head for most of it. In a show with lots of disappointing villains, I think he's near the top. I found him perplexing. I don't know, maybe you've read the manga, maybe you can tell me more about Magatsuhi. that would make me appreciate him more. I'm guessing probably not.
No, he was basically just the evil side of the Shikon Jewel, and his biggest motivation or biggest like role was just stealing Kagome's powers, because obviously she's the one to be feared. So can't defeat Naraku if her powers are sealed. So that was pretty much the plot device there. Kind of delayed the whole like confrontation. I feel like just kind of delaying her, really stealing her powers away.
I'm sure there's all sorts of explanations buried in the series itself that justify this. I don't remember them, but you had Magatsuhi playing this role as the evil entity within the Shikon Jewel, and then in the end you have like the actual jewel starts talking to Kagome in the end, which I found kind of funny because it sounds just like the black orb from Heavy Metal. That's kind of the vibe I got from the Shikon Jewel at the end of Inuyasha, the final act. For the most part, I did feel that the finale worked, and I did appreciate like it's predictable. There's not a whole lot of big surprises, but I did appreciate that part of the story was kind of paced more or less how it would have been if it were part of the original Inuyasha series instead of at the breakneck pacing that you saw mostly in the first half of the series. I did find the second half kind of slowed down a little bit. It doesn't go back to like the like really strong two-parters that you got early on in the original Inuyasha series. But you have a lot of good standalone episodes. The one with like the spider demon, I thought that was the first episode in the series. I'm just like, oh, okay, this is good. This is exciting. You got my attention, Inuyasha, the final act. You did it. But yeah, it's like it all just amounts to something that's for the most part serviceable. I also talk about Miroku and Sango in this series because I mean, I don't think anyone was really surprised by sort of how they leaned on their relationship or how that played into their motivations in the end. But it's a little disappointing to see the way it kind of played out. Like with Miroku, you have his ultra powerful wind tunnel, which it's kind of funny because it's so overpowered. Like in this series, they realized very quickly that it was overpowered. There always has to be plot devices that stop him from using it. They milk it for drama so hard in this, and how the wind tunnel will be the end of him because it was too powerful. Because he used to suck up too many things, but he has to keep using it to suck up things. And then you have like Sango's motivation is more or less, again, in service of Miroku for the most part.
I just remember being very disappointed by her weapon upgrade. It was just like, oh, I gotta fight the demons of my former weapon that I put poison on and I harmed, even though we fought together. And they're like, oh, we're demons. She's just like, she was honest. She's like, I can't make a promise I won't sacrifice you again to save Miroku. And then they're like, oh, we are demons. We don't have compassion and empathy. We don't understand. And they're like, oh, wait a second. We hear Miroku's resolve. Okay, we'll fight with you. And I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah, that was so dumb.
It's just like, okay,
it's just
sure.
Like, Miroku's resolve, that's what, like, really that was the critical element here.
Oh, the man will also fight for you, so
Yeah.
we will fight against you again.
Yeah. Disappointing in a lot of ways.
Well,
or like
especially after Kagura dies, Solita gives to Shomaru like a speck of compassion, and then he gets his upgrade, which he doesn't even get in the end because it's given to Inuyasha. And then he got like even Sango's weapon upgrade was just like had to rely on Miroku.
Yeah.
And Miroku didn't even need a power up. He just had medicine where he just numbed the pain. He was already too overpowered. Oh, he couldn't really upgrade anything either.
It's just all about upgrades. That's just, it's just all like. I don't know if the way that they approached the adaptation just made that more obvious, or if it was at least a little more played out a little more naturally in the original manga. But yeah, in the anime, it's just upgrade. It's all that's what everything is built around.
It's the final. Everyone get your most powerful weapon of your JRPG party before you fight the big bad. That was pretty much the feeling.
Let's also talk about the real best part of Inuyasha, which is the theme songs. Theme songs are always the best part because Inuyasha always got the biggest talent because it was a big primetime show. You get your Nami Amaros, your various boy bands, your Do As Infinities. What songs did you like from the final act?
Final act. Oops. I went through all of the songs actually from first season of Final Act, and all of my favorite songs are not from the Final Act.
Yeah, I know. We're in the B plus at best sort of situation with Inuyasha the final act. But we got a few bangers. I like the opening by Do As Infinity. It's a good one. I like the first two, like With You by Triple A. That song's very different when you listen to the full version. But the TV cut, pretty good stuff. And then what was it? Diamond by Alan.
Oh yes.
Who's Alan? I've never heard of Alan before. Who names their band Alan? No, that's the name of the artist. Her name is Alan. Oh, she's from China. I'm just looking at her Wikipedia entry. That's not what I expected. Oh wow, she's interesting. Wow, I got to read more about Alan Dawa Dolma. Her yeah, I did not anticipate like a fascinating rabbit hole about this person. But yeah, the second the snowy theme ending, because they fit like 4 endings into a 26 episode series, which is impressive. Top 2 songs in the final act. What are your top 2?
I think definitely With You. It's definitely the most unique, and I didn't mind the opening either. Like they kept that opening throughout, and I think it was a good kind of like a feel good opening.
But yeah, let's talk about just the dub too. Ocean Studios dub, all the star players. Well, actually, no, not all the star players. A number of people were replaced in this dub. They couldn't get them back. For the people who did return, I mean, we got Richard Ian Cox as Inuyasha. He's as Inuyasha as ever. I don't think he skipped a beat between the old series and this one. And then, of course, the late great Kirby Morrow and Kelly Sheridan as Miroku and Sango kill it. They absolutely killed it, as always. I always love those two as those characters. And yeah, Paul Dobson as Naraku is he's Paul Dobson, all right, as always. But then we had a few cast members who were replaced. Most obviously and prominently was Kagome. Monica Story did not reprise her role as Kagome, and instead we got Kira Tozer, who actually has never been in any other anime. And Sarah, what did you think of Kira Tozer? How did you find her performance? Like she is obviously cast as a voice match for Monica's Story, but how did that work for you?
I think the cast, I did alternate just to sort of compare, but I thought the dub was fantastic. I think Naraku's heh is probably the greatest evil laugh that I
Yeah.
just no matter what is going on with Naraku, he's sliced in half,
Just
or
like,
he's just heh, just heh 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 heh. So, no, I thought the cast was really good. I thought the replacements were really well done. A lot of them were obviously voice matches. Others were a little more obvious, like Kaede, but I think...
Yeah, Kaede, you could tell was she was completely different. Yeah, Linda Darlow, someone else I don't think I've heard in any other anime as well. And also, Aiden Drummond, Brian Drummond's son, was Kohaku. And Kohaku's had a couple voices. They're all completely different. And Aiden Drummond just kind of did his own thing as Kohaku. And yeah, it's good.
I was going to say, like, Kohaku felt like his voice was a little lower in, like, a later dub. But, like, I thought that was really good. Although I feel like 50 of his lines were just like, sister.
Yeah. Sister. Yeah. Kira Tozer, I thought she was a little stiff in the early episodes. By the time we get to the end, she's pretty much indistinguishable from Monica's Story. But yeah, that's really my only criticism. And of course, I think most notably, Michael Dangerfield replaced David Kay. David Kay, too big for Inuyasha. He's moved to LA. Now the Last Week Tonight with John. Actually, he wasn't on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver at that point. But that's the kind of stuff he had moved on to at that point from Inuyasha the Final Act. But Michael Dangerfield, who we've had on this show, he was one of my first voice actor interviews. He replaced him as a voice match, and he is good. He does a David K voice match perfectly fine. And it is funny because David K was, too big for Inuyasha the Final Act, but not too big for Yashahime, that other Inuyasha sequel we haven't talked about, and maybe we shouldn't talk about because it doesn't exist, right, Sarah? Yashahime does
What
not.
Inuyasha sequel? I would love an Inuyasha sequel. It would be about like Kakome's daughter, and she's going on adventures with her parents, and everything is fine, and Rin
Yeah.
is not the mother.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, of course of course she's not. We don't have to
Oh
even
no!
entertain such an idea.
Gosh.
Because Yashahime was dubbed in LA, but they in that one. So Yashahime was a new sequel that was done for Inuyasha just a few years ago. Ironically, that was widely available to stream, even though the final act wasn't available to stream in Canada at that time. So I do wonder if a lot of people jumped into Yashahime not actually having seen the final act. But yeah, David K, because they were doing it in LA and just the dub was done by an LA studio, they just brought him in. He wasn't too big for Yashihime at that point, which was kind of, they got him for the worst show, which is disappointing. I'm glad they got those other they were able to, the other voice actors were able to phone in, except of course Kirby Morrow could only do the first episode because very tragically he passed away right when production was starting on that. And then he was recast after that by Ian James Corlett, I believe. But one other character, Koga, of course, Scott McNeil, back as Koga. Koga, I think that a lot of his stuff was cut from the manga in this. My understanding is that his storyline was pretty much cut down to the bare essentials. But he did get a bonus scene at the end where he's marrying what's her name, the little red-haired wolf girl, who was not in the manga, Ayame, not in the
Yeah,
manga.
yummy.
Yeah, but she got a fun little bonus scene in that, which was kind of funny. I thought. Inuyasha the Final Act, finally got to watch it. Did not have a major impact on me, but I'm glad on principle it was finally there. My last final major grievance with Viz. Oh, and one other complaint about the ending: the necklace that makes Inuyasha sit whenever Kagome says "sit boy," that didn't come up at all in the final few episodes. There's no resolution for that. That was like the major gag, and it just kind of fades away, and he's still wearing that cursed necklace like in the finale, and they just don't say anything about it. Is that weird?
Like, oh my god, yeah, he's still wearing it.
Yeah.
I guess
It's
it's
just like
just.
there's zero resolution for that like major element of the series. Yeah.
No, I just find that so funny. It just never gets resolved. Like, he wore it since episode 1, or pretty much like.
Episode 2, I think, is when that was
Yeah.
introduced, and it's just like it's just there for the running gag, and then nothing comes of it. Like they were still doing the gag right up until close to the finale, but then when there's no resolution for it. They don't even acknowledge it. I'm just like, that's a big oversight there. I mean, I watched until the end of the Band of Seven arc, but it was just after that ended, it was just endless filler, and then I just kind of fell off of it. And I understand like between like that and the final few episodes that I did catch, like not a whole lot happened. It was just like a bunch of stuff with the infant.
Who was, yeah, trying to find like the final shard between like the living and the not, and
Yeah, it
it
was
just
just
took
like
forever.
infant, like, and then that just carried on into the final act, and it's just like I don't care about this infant.
I remember when they're like, "Oh God, they finally split the baby apart. Is it dead?" And like, no, you just grew the infant's back, and then it grew another child. I'm like, "Oh my God, these are the two worst
It just
incarnations
keeps
I've."
it just keeps going in circles. These stupid incarnations. I mean, there was the one that was kind of cool that didn't have a face. What was that one again?
Abuso, I loved. He was just like he had like no memory, no identity, and he would like kill to take a face, and I thought that was fascinating. I thought I thought Naraku did have some interesting aspects where he tried to shed his heart, and some of the earlier incarnations were, well done. Some of them were just pure flesh he was just trying to get rid of. But
Yeah,
I really
but
like
again,
Muso.
yeah, again, it just goes back to that weird idea of purity, and just he's just trying to shed all of this stuff to achieve this idea he has of purity, and it's just so kind of gross and futile.
Oh, I know. And then at the very end, where he could take the final step to become a pure demon, a pure monster, like he's still like he had the Shikon Jewel for a couple episodes, complete, and he still did not use it. And I
Yeah,
just
because he's
love
just
how
he's afraid of just like what's actually going to happen when this thing is when he overcomes the purity of the purified jewel. Like,
yeah. And then like Kagome calls him out on that, just like you've had it for still haven't absorbed it yet. You're scared. Your true wish was never granted. Like I actually love how the finale was done. It could have just been like Inuyasha uses tomato Zangetsuha, and then he gets sucked in, and everyone he dies.
rolls right off the tongue. Mado's on Getsu.
I was like, you know what? That's one attack I really loved it. They had to repeat it so many times. Medu
Yeah,
Zangetsuha.
Adamant Barrage, not so much. Um, yeah, yeah, but like
Dang
that.
it.
See, that's sort of what should have been at the heart and the real focus. Just like not focusing on the upgrade and upgrade and upgrade. Like that, I think that should have been downplayed more, and they should have just focused on this idea of the futile and just this futile and kind of terrifying idea of purity and what this meant to Naraku and to other characters. That kind of trying to cling on to that a little more, I think might have made it stronger.
Oh, I did like how and then the very end was like, after they defeat Naraku, then Kagome has her own hurdles when she gets well sucked into the underworld, into the jewel. I really liked that because usually JRPG villain is defeated, everyone goes home wrapped up, but no, she had to pretty much make the correct wish to stop that cycle of good and evil, and that again, like Naraku's in that impurity. Like I don't know, I feel like there's so much, a little bit more that could have been done. I feel like
Yeah.
the fact that Naraku had a human heart, he understood the pain that he loved it. Pit, Pit Kagome, Kikyo, everyone together,
Mhm.
Sango and Moroku's pain, Kohaku's pain. Like he just understood that compassion, and I don't know, I just felt like there was just a little bit more to that.
It's just being on the brink of all of that was just and about to like crush it all was just something he didn't like that idea.
No, definitely. So I
Yeah.
did love that little extra at the very end. He's dead, but like if Kagome made a wish out of fear, she and Naraku would fight against each other for eternity. And I just love how in the end he was manipulated by the Shikon Jewel. The wish he made when Kagome got caught wasn't even his wish. In the
Yeah.
end, in the end, his own true wish was to be with Kikyo never happened, and instead the Shikon Jewel forced him to wish something that wasn't even his.
Yeah. Still, at the end of the day, Inuyasha, the final act, not the greatest adaptation decisions a lot of the time because it's tough to do what they were trying to do. But it still hit me as comfort food. I would watch it with my wife every night and be just like, yeah, let's just unwind, watch Inuyasha. It it captures still what we liked watching about this show 20 years ago, and that made it nice to watch now. So I think that's where I am. That's where I am with this. I enjoyed watching it for that reason.
Yeah, basically solid comfort food, really
Hmm.
fun manga. It's a good cast of characters, like just a very solid cast of characters. Obviously, I think we'll never get over Kagura leaving so soon.
No.
Koga, we can understand why he was wrapped up the way he was. I mean, his Garashi, like the ultimate weapon he gained for himself, that was a level 1 wind scar. Like
Yeah.
I think he used it 3 times, didn't really help. The shards in his legs was stolen. Kikyo died, so he's no longer needed for the love triangle. He pretty much just had like I feel bad, people kind of wanted him at the finale, like to be there with Shishomaru and Inuyasha and be part of that, but I'm like, I can understand why his role as the love interest, which is already resolved now that Kikyo died, and he's just like, peace, I'm not here for this love triangle anymore.
Yeah.
Love quad.
Yeah. That's all I got to say about Inuyasha. Do you have any final thoughts on Inuyasha, the final act?
I think with Inuyasha, I think from beginning to end, it's a very serviceable, very enjoyable, binge watchable anime. And I
Oh
think it
yeah,
aged
it's
well.
binge watch thing you throw on the background. Inuyasha's perfect for that. That actually brings me to the thing I did want to ask you. If you were to recommend someone the Inuyasha today, would you recommend it at all? And if so, would you recommend the manga or the anime?
I would recommend both. So I think the easiest right now, because it's only a few dollars a month on Viz Media, you can read the manga, and the manga is very short. Like most of the chapters are 18 pages. I time myself. I Most chapters I was able to finish in 2 minutes each, or maybe 3 to 4 if it's like it's not a very text heavy manga series. So it's super readable. You get to see Rumiku's amazing panels. The early, especially with the earlier parts of the manga, before the sword kind of takes over a lot of the action scenes. There's a lot of great action scenes, hand-to-hand combat. The gags are always top notch. I mean, if you're a fan of like any of her work, like it's still great. It's a great way to get into the series. Very readable. Um, I think you could probably read about like 6 chapters by the time you finish the first episode.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Maybe think of it this way. If you want to just kind of escape from everything and get sucked into a fun story, maybe the manga is better. If you want to throw on something in the background that you can binge watch while you doom scroll on your phone, maybe the Inuyasha anime is a better option for that, because you can very much just throw it on in the background and do something else, and you will not miss anything important. You can follow it, no problem. It is designed to be consumed or to be watched and enjoyed that way. So maybe it just comes down to your needs and preferences.
oh yeah, definitely. So yeah, I do say give the manga a shot because it's a very easy read, and if you enjoy it, the I found I remember, you know how like everything you're like, oh, does this is this anime gonna age really bad? I haven't seen it in it like it aired 25 years ago. So, and I binge watched the entire series a few years ago, and it still held up. Like a couple of jokes obviously aged a little bit. I don't think Moroku's ever going to get better. Um,
No, I mean he's always punished for his antics, and I think
yeah,
that's kind of the
and
critical thing that makes it palatable for people.
yeah,
So
and it gets dropped in the final act. I almost feel like they realized the joke wasn't funny, so it got pretty much dropped near the end. And plus, it was really serious, more serious. But no, the dub holds up really well. The animation, especially the early episodes, I think it holds up really well. And if you don't remember the style, they'll give you every flashback, every season that you
yep,
can remember what they took from you.
yep. All right, and yeah, the Viz Media app, it's pretty great. It's a low cost, so I mean, buy Canadian. I don't know where that kind of service would fall for you, but you get a lot of value with that app. And they have something very important on the Viz Media app, which is simultaneous serialized publications of a lot of shojo manga. And that is something I think needs a lot of support now. Is not just buying shojo manga, but actually being able to follow it week to week. You don't have a lot of options for that. So if you want to try some of that stuff out, the Viz Media app is the way to go.
Ooh, that means I'm gonna give a random shout out to Beauty Pop. So if you
Hey
just
there.
happen to see, there you go. If you happen to see Beauty Pop on Viz Media, that was one of my favorite shoujo manga years ago, and I'm just so glad it's available. I'm so glad a lot of shoujo manga in general is just available in that Viz Media, like stuff that you probably did not get or you've seen before. So.
Shoujo manga, like, it's kind of sad the state of it right now, like especially in the West, because I think I saw like a list last year that said, like, it had a list of like all the 10 best selling girls manga or manga for girls and women in Japan, and like only something like 2 of them were actually available in English in any form. Whereas when you look at the more male skewing ones, they were almost all available. So that market is like cratered here so much. Like in the 2000s, like Tokyo Pop released so much shoujo manga. It was like such a central part of the manga market, and it's just gone and hasn't come back. And it's just like it feels like you have to twist these publishers' arms just to license any manga. Like I don't think like all the top of everything being published in like Hanato Yume magazine or something right now. I think the most popular titles in that even aren't even available here. So if there is anything especially being simulpubbed on Viz Media, yeah, definitely support it. Of course, I can't actually name any recommendations off the top of my head, which is quite damning. But it's cool. It's cool. Check it out. Man, like remember, girls were such a big driver for Inuyasha back in the day, and if you followed my blog back in the day, you always you knew, like I knew, yeah, this the way to go. We got to get shoujo anime on YTV. We got to tap into that market, and it never went that way, and I understand why. it never happened, but what could have been? What could have been?
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, Sarah, where can people find you on social media if they want to follow your stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on Kittea on Blue Sky Social. So Kittea dot bsky.social. So I'm on there. You'll probably see me gushing about Xenoblade Chronicles X for the next 2 months. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for tuning into Zannen Canada. If you've been with me since the beginning, thank you for following me these past 10 years. I can't guarantee that this podcast will be around for another 10 years, but I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and I hope you follow me in that time. And you can reach me on Blue Sky at jbetteridge, or email zonnencanada@gmail.com. As I said earlier, I'd love to have just general feedback on the show from people. I'd love to just see what people think, what your thoughts are, and I'll see you again.